inaugural episode of TPG Talks. I am your host, Lauren Mitsakis. I've been a member of the professional group for 8 years now, and I'm very thrilled this year to be serving as the chair of marketing and social media. Today, we are embarking on a very exciting and special journey with this podcast where we will be exploring the extraordinary stories and experiences of women who truly epitomize the spirit of the professional group. Now, before we get into our guest speaker for today's conversation, I'd really like to take a moment to introduce my wonderful co-host and partner in dialogue, the dynamic Cindy Jennings. So Cindy, for those that don't know you, could you share a little bit about yourself?
Thanks, Lauren. I am tickled to death to be here today. I've been a member of TPG for about 10 years, I think. I tried to look it up, I couldn't find it. And began working as a committee member and then moved into board positions for every year since I've been there. And it's been absolutely wonderful. In terms of professional experience, I started my career out of college doing research on atherosclerosis, was published in that, decided it wasn't for me, and then went into sales and marketing in the publishing world, and then about 35 years in staffing.
Oh, wonderful. Well, I have always enjoyed you on the group, so I'm very excited that you're able to join me as I start this new endeavor with TPG. It is very new for us. So recently, you are still a member of the board, technically, and you still are involved very much with the organization. And right now, I know that you're currently working on helping to expand upon our mission statement. So I know that not many people know exactly what the mission statement is for TPG. So could you expand a little bit more on that for those that don't know it?
Yes, I'm happy to. As a matter of fact, we're going to be rolling out the mission statement and values at our March breakfast meeting for all the members, but the board has been busy trying to put together something that truly represents our group. And basically, our mission is to foster connections among women, both who are currently working and those who have retired, from a diverse range of backgrounds. To boil it all down, we're a community that is absolutely committed to creating opportunities for our members to build robust relationships and also their networks.
Wonderful. Awesome. So we're going to be kicking off this empowering series. So just to wrap up into that, I kind of want to talk about how TPG Talks kind of feeds into that mission of TPG and how it kind of expands upon it. So right now, when I proposed the idea of the podcast, I really saw it as an extension of TPG's mission. My hope was that this podcast would serve as a platform to not only engage with our members, but also with the broader community, those that can't really come to our monthly meetings, but, might have access, obviously, to the internet and to podcasts. I think it's an opportunity for those that can't do it to be able to share with those diverse and empowering stories from women in business and just in our network in general. And then it truly amplifies the essence of TPG. So through these conversations, we're hoping that we inspire and that it resonates not only within our immediate community, but far beyond, and thus reinforcing the impact and relevance of TPG. And I feel like that's something that has been a real goal of ours in the past, and we're really trying to promote it now in the future.
I totally agree. As you think about that and you think about these conversations with these wonderful women, I'm curious, as you're thinking about it, what would a successful podcast look like?
Great question. For me, a successful episode is definitely one that not only shares compelling narratives, but it also leaves our listeners feeling inspired and motivated. It's capturing the essence of these women's journeys, their triumphs, their challenges, all the lessons that they learned along the way, and then giving it to our audience in a way that helps them understand, like, hey, maybe I relate to this as well. And then with that successful episode, in my eyes, it helps foster that sense of connection and motivation, because I hope that it empowers people to be like, hey, I see myself in this journey, or I really want to act upon this. And I just really want to be able to enable people to connect more with our group and with our members, with our guest speakers, ultimately just expanding upon all those people to connect with, because ultimately that's what we're trying to do with
Yeah,
TPG is we foster those meaningful connections. I know that's something that we've kind of always kept within our tagline, fostering those meaningful connections, and this is just another way to do that. So a successful episode really would do all of those things, just
great.
engage people.
That's ambitious, but I think we can
Yes.
do it. And I love the fact that we've our part of the mission, part of the behaviors really of
Mhm.
our women is to try to make sure that we're reaching out to a wide range of women. So
Absolutely.
we're not a group that is a vertical, like we're
Mhm.
servicing. We have all women from legal careers or people from medical or real estate or things like that. We're currently comprised of a complete range of people,
Absolutely.
and we want to include others. And I think for that reason, anybody could tune into this and find some way to connect with the speaker who's there. And I'm really looking forward to seeing what happens with this.
Exactly. Yes.
That's also, speaking of diverse things, a great way to segue into the introduction of our guest speaker for this morning, who is Melissa Williams Murphy. Melissa is a native Houstonian, and she's got a passion for children's literacy and education. She was our speaker at our January breakfast meeting this month, and she shared absolutely amazing insights into her work. And she really is, as she describes herself, two people. She works directly with the Bryan Museum in Galveston, and she also is heavily involved with her organization, iWrite, and was involved in the creation of the biggest book ever published, I Am Texas. And we're delighted to have her be our first guest in the podcast and share more about bringing history and literacy together, and how her organizations are supporting that endeavor. So we'd like to welcome Melissa.
Oh, hi, Melissa. Thank you
Hey,
so much
Melissa.
for being with us today.
Thank you for having me.
So we really enjoyed your presentation at our January breakfast meeting. We've just done a quick introduction to you and the organizations that you are a part of, as well as some of the endeavors that those organizations have done, specifically with I Am Texas, iWrite, and the Bryan Museum. So we're excited for a chance to talk with you more about those amazing things that you're doing with your organization. So if there's anything else you want to start with, the floor is yours.
Yes, I know. There have been many things that have gone on probably in the last 5 years, specifically when you have a project like I Am Texas, where you're breaking a Guinness World Record. It takes a lot of partners and a lot of planning. And the idea, really started about 5 years ago. So I loved with everything that was going on at iWrite. And then as we'll continue to hear more about my story, getting to the Bryan Museum, I Am Texas, and that big book with the kids and telling their Texas story really did bring the two worlds together. And that's what's been so exciting for me, to be able to plug into the community with education in such a different way. So I would love to start with kind of how iWrite got started, if that's okay.
Absolutely. Yes. I think that's one of the things that we really latched onto during your breakfast meeting. So please feel free.
Yes. So I started as a children's author. That's how the
Mhm.
iWrite organization was truly inspired. My background is not writing, though, even though I've been writing ever since I was in third grade. That was kind of my time in my life when I realized how much I love to write. Something else also happened in the third grade. I received my very first pet for making the honor roll. And
Oh,
people who have come to know me know that I typically don't do things that a lot of other people do. I'm kind of strange like that. So just picture me, this tiny little blonde girl with curls, and the pet that I would have chosen, it was a 3-foot iguana. So that was
oh,
my pet. Iggy was his name. And I used to write stories about this reptile and, come up with ideas and adventures for him. And it was always a love of mine to write fictional stories. And I eventually started doing that as a young adult after I graduated from grad school with, I studied professional counseling. And then before that, for my undergrad, I studied psychology. And really, I dove into that more about wanting to be able to write about it and utilize that background for other means within education and possibly a career that revolved around kids and early childhood development. So I started a publishing company back in 2006, 2007 called Longtail Publishing, tail like iguana tail. The story just, gets cuter and cuter, right? And then I went on a year-long book tour in Texas in 2008. And I would go and talk about how to come up with characters, what publishing is all about, get kids excited to write. And in that very first book tour, most of the schools that I visited were in the greater Houston area. And then I started branching off to Austin and Dallas and eventually California. And 20 school visits turned into 200. I mean, it was a constant thing that I was doing at that time, writing another book, creating a series, doing a spinoff series, creating picture books, chapter books, all kinds of things. Eventually had 12 children's books for all different age levels. And during that time, I would hear kids ask the same question. And remember, this is back when self-publishing wasn't even a thing yet. Like there was one self-publisher out there that anybody even knew about. And so kids were asking me, can kids be authors too? And I thought, well, I mean, of course you can, but I had the tools to be able to actually technically publish these kids professionally. So I thought, why not start a contest and give kids the opportunity to become published authors? Because I will never forget what I felt like the first time my very first book came out. And I wanted that feeling where you just feel such pride and success, like all the things. And I thought, just again, having the background in psychology, it makes sense to allow kids to have these early successes when their brain and their personality is developing. And so that was the background behind the publishing contest. Give early successes to kids at a young age, and then let them build upon that. And then the way I was raised was the sky is the limit. And so I wanted to utilize some of that upbringing that I had in my own childhood and put it into the nonprofit. And so the mission of iWrite is to build student confidence through writing. So we start with that opportunity. And then we also have programs that go into many of our underserved schools to allow kids that maybe they didn't even know that they like to write. Maybe they need more training. The teachers even may need more training to get their kids excited about writing in the classroom, and not how easy it can be, because it's not easy. I mean, I tell kids all the time, to be a better writer, you have to do it every day. I mean, you wouldn't tell a kid who's trying to be a pro athlete to just practice every once in a while. It's the same thing. To get better at something, you have to do it every day. But writing is unique in the sense that it is useful to everyone. It is that next level of literacy. We start with reading, then we go with writing, and then we go to higher level communication. And we all know that if you're able to communicate well, you have already set yourself higher than people who can't. I mean, it's just the reality. But do we teach these skills to kids appropriately at the correct ages? I don't think we do. So that's a lot of the background behind why iWrite exists and why we have a youth club for middle school and high school students, why we have an entirely student-run magazine. I mean, the kids are the publishers, the kids are the editors, and they are taken seriously, the iWriter magazine. It's why kids that I saw published when they were in 4th grade are now literally in their 20s running our iWrite Alumni Association. It's about giving them those experiences. We have a huge 400 to 500 people gala every year where we celebrate all of our published authors, our annual book signing going into its 15th year. And kids are our MCs. You know, we give them opportunities to shine and to really embrace the benefit in public speaking. And it all started with their writing and getting their voice out.
Mm-hmm.
So that's what iWrite is all about. And in that, we had the opportunity when the Bryan Museum first started back in 2016 was when we did our first summer camp partnership with the Bryan Museum, because, you know, history and literacy, they merge together very nicely. How can you become educated on your history if you can't read and read well and understand it truly? And then there's the writing component in writing your own history, writing your own essays, you know, taking it further. So there was a lot of synergy there, and we had some great summers with Texas history camp, story writing camp. And then we were able to utilize the Bryan Museum and all of the amazing Texas history galleries to be inspired for that writing, and even built a curriculum together with the two organizations. So I had those early years of finding a way to put writing and history together. And after some time, J.P. Bryan, the founder of the Bryan Museum, he saw how fun and exciting that was, and he had been to some of our big book signing events. And what is the one thing? So now I'm now gonna ask you all this question. Whenever you think of kids and history, what's the first word that probably comes to mind? History is what?
Boring.
Boring, right? It's just what it is. I mean, we have to accept that. And JP knows that. I mean, there's a lot of history that's not really been taught well over the years, right? And it just makes it where it's not the fun, exciting subject. But here's the interesting thing. How many times do you hear a child who didn't like to read, all of a sudden they were given a specific type of book and now they are an avid reader? Guess what kind of book it typically is for that child to get them to actually care about reading?
History?
Historical fiction. That is where they relate, because they're like, this is so fascinating. I didn't realize that this actually happened. And then they want to know more and more. Isn't that interesting? The kids that don't want to read and then the subject that everybody thinks is boring are the two things that when you put them together, you create readership. So, you know, there are ways that you can really relate to kids and get on their level to make history exciting. So that was what JP had asked, if I would come over to the Bryan Museum, partner everything together, and try to find a way to make history exciting for the next generation. Because we all know if the next generation doesn't care about history, we don't preserve it like we could. And eventually we lose it. You know, after a certain group of people are gone, it's gone if the younger generation doesn't care about it. So that's our mission, to preserve Texas history specifically at the Bryan Museum. And the only way to do that, because I mean, the visitorship that comes in, typically everybody is excited to learn about history of a certain age. So what do you do once everybody's gone? The history's gone. So what we've found through writing and through this partnership with iWrite, where kids really start to relate to Texas history, is their story inside the world of Texas history. And then they start to learn more, want to know more, start to do their research. So in 2022, I had been the director at the Bryan Museum for about a year and a half before this project, I Am Texas, finally launched. but it was all about I Am Texas is giving a child a chance to tell their Texas story, what Texas means to them, and make history. So I have one of the smaller versions of the book right here, which displays the beautiful diversity of all of the kids in the greater Houston, Galveston, and Texas area. And the one that broke the Guinness World Record back in November of 2022 stands 7 feet tall and weighs 496 pounds. And when it's opened, it's over 11 feet wide. And it's like a delicate giant, though. It's it's almost its own worst enemy. So you have to be very careful with this thing. It takes 8 professionals to move it and put it on display. And it's traveled all over Texas. This last year, it was on tour. It was at the Alamo. It was at the Texas Capitol. It was declared I Am Texas Day, Houston in August. Our past mayor, Mayor Turner, declared that day I Am Texas Day. And through all the programming and all of the touring that it did, we always had kids from the region who were published come and be a part of the program whenever the book was revealed at that location. So, I mean, we had some of our published authors on the steps of the Capitol. We had some of them shaking hands with our senators, shaking hands with our mayor, getting to talk to them about what they put inside that book. Again, I mean, I know you all see the importance in that. And it's interesting, even when we were with some of the kids, one of them was just going off to college, and she was just so thrilled that she got to meet Mayor Turner. And, you know, at iWrite, we mentor these kids too. And just even explaining to her, you know, it's important who you know. It's important that you met him. Stay in touch with him. You know, it's things like that where we're really purposeful with the kids that we build these relationships with through the program. And it all comes back to literacy, your voice, you know, embracing who you are here in Texas. So it's just been exciting to get to kind of see all of that happen, but it took 2 organizations coming together to make something that big possible. And so I believe everything happens for a reason. And so being 2 people these days, it's all working out.
Well, I
That's
think
amazing.
that that was one of the things that I actually didn't realize, you know, or it didn't click until you just said it now about making sure the kids understand the importance of these relationships and making these connections and maintaining these connections. Obviously, a group such as TPG, you know, we're all about making those connections. We were talking about it a little bit earlier during our intro, and that is something that everybody needs to know and to learn how to do. And considering the fact that you have kids that have been around long enough to now have an alumni organizations and they are still maintaining that, you know, you're not just like that from just starting with the literacy part. It seems you know, I'm a big reader, so like it's big for me, but for some people it does seem small, but you're able to compound and expand upon that, and you're giving them other tools that it's not just reading, it's not just writing, it's teaching them how to behave and to act, you know, down the future as they become adults. And those are skills that are pivotal to, you know, individuals as they grow and learn. So
Right.
I really appreciated knowing that your organization does help with that as well.
Melissa, how many contributors were there for the I Am Texas?
So our goal on I Am Texas was to make sure that we were able to publish 1,000 kids. So that was our minimum goal, but they still had to make sure that they were writing a story about Texas. So there were entries, you know, sometimes people don't follow the rules, you know, so we had about, I would say 1,500 kids who entered and 1,000 of them got published. So it was a huge undertaking to go through all of that, because just because you entered didn't mean you were going to get published.
And are there plans to have a second edition with different writers or?
Well, so we're not going to try to break our own record. So not
Okay.
that, but the I Am Texas writing and art competition is now an annual competition. So we were able to make that the theme of iWrite's annual publishing contest in 2022. But iWrite's annual publishing contest theme changes every year. So last year it was sports writing. This year it's fantasy writing. But I Am Texas is now its own competition. So strategically, what I did, since the Bryan Museum didn't have that program and was a newer organization with a newer education department in comparison to iWrite, I saved 10 years of having to build something by doing a fast track. And now the I Am Texas competition has the viewership and the entries that took iWrite 10 years to get.
Oh my gosh.
So it was one of those things where it's like, I really don't have time to start from scratch here, but let's piggyback off of one and then let it become its own thing afterwards. So now I Am Texas is in its third year. And the exciting thing about that is there's such, we partner with iWrite on that, on the publishing side of things, because a journal is created, a technical journal that we put in the Bryan Museum library every year now. But in the whole contest portals, we use the same systems and everything, and we work together. But now the museum has something that it can really call its own because of the theme, and the theme just makes so much sense. And the kids get to utilize the artifacts in the museum as inspiration for that competition as well. So we're able to expose them to all of the history available either in the building or online, because again, we know not everybody can get down to the building, of course. So that way we're able to still get the Bryan Museum and everything it has to offer educators and students in front of them, which would probably be a good lead into some of the things at the Bryan Museum and just the growth that we've seen there since the launch of our education department. Would y'all like me to move into the
Absolutely.
I have one question before you do
Yes.
that, because I wrote down that there are groups that are middle school and high school. So is someone who's in high school who may never have been exposed to this or chose not to participate or whatever, can people begin their journey with iWrite as late as high school?
As late as being a senior in high school, absolutely.
Okay.
I mean, some of our most connected kids started very late. And then right after they graduated, they joined the Alumni Association, or they asked, you have volunteer opportunities. And so, I mean, there's something for every single level. The only level that iWrite hasn't really embraced, but I know that's going to change, and that is probably because I have kids now that are young, is the early childhood developmental stages of writing and storytelling literacy. And I mean, you know, you can't do everything, but I have kids that age. So it's a lot easier when I already know I'm going to start doing this with them anyway, to build it into iWrite's programming as well. So that's exciting for me, because my target audience was always the upper elementary age students. And that's because of how much reading and writing attention really launches in those grades. And that was always just an exciting, as far as book development, that was always an exciting time. The genres, I always enjoyed it myself. So that's where I kind of put a lot of my focus for a long time. But now, I mean, we see you really do need a lot of bridging, because we're seeing extreme issues, at least here in Houston, when it comes to literacy for these third and fourth graders. They are not where they're supposed to be.
Right.
There are issues that are occurring much earlier that are not getting taken care of. And so that's where in the nonprofit world, it's always about the need, you know, and what is the need and what is going on and how can we fix it? And we're seeing these kids, they're just not where they're supposed to be right now. So
thank you. That's I'm
Yes.
excited to hear of the opportunity with this. And I'd
Yes.
love to get a text message with a complete sentence from one of my grandchildren is the other part of that. Just saying.
Yes. I know, I know. We're well, you know, when you're in this, I feel like I'm getting a delay on my end. Okay, there we go. When you're in this industry and then you have your own kids, when you're in this industry, you start to realize all the things that you preached forever, you get to now practice on your own kids. So I am definitely, I mean, I'm the lead at my kids' school when it comes to waiting to give your kids a cell phone until you're after 8th grade. We don't own iPads in our home. We do not allow any form of electronics at our dinner table. I mean, I used to have to go on television every week and talk about the dangers of exposing kids to technology while their brain is developing at an early age. So it's, and literacy is a big part of that. Creativity is a big part of that. So it all kind of goes hand in hand. And when you're diving into that, you realize you can't let technology be the blockage for a child to become who they could become due to a technology addiction. So, and it's, you know, we hate saying that word because it sounds so scary to say that about a child, but it's true. And it can happen in the very youngest of ages. And so, you know, it's the brain is developing. An addiction is just your brain at the end of the day and your behaviors. So setting kids up for addiction at such an early age is not a good thing. So we're all literally just riding without a seatbelt right now is the way I describe technology and exposing kids too early. I mean, I'm, you know, constantly even in the school, I'm like, y'all aren't going to start bringing iPads into these early elementary classes, are you? You know, there's no need for this.
Right.
So, but I don't know. It's not popular. I don't have the popular voice right now. But I have to be that person. I'm in literacy and education.
Right.
So.
Yes, but I think you're doing a great job as far as creating a space where kids can truly engage and then explore, you know, something that they might not necessarily would have had access to previously.
Right.
So we're definitely appreciative of that. That's one of the things that I'll probably have my kids see how they can get involved with that because they're definitely of age to be doing that. You know, my youngest is definitely too small. He's still 2, so he's still trying to form,
I
you
have
know,
a
3, 4
2-year-old
word
too.
sentence. Yeah,
Yes.
so he's trying to form those 4-word sentences. You know, we're getting there though. But you know, we have a 9-year-old daughter as well as a 13-year-old son. So they are definitely within those age groups to be able to engage. And absolutely, you're right about all the stuff with technology. But then also, one of the things that I did want to touch on before we go into the Bryan Museum is I've noticed with my 13-year-old, what you say about history is true. He does not like chapter books. He does not like reading fiction. He'll read some graphic novels, but what really does get him engaged are those historical books where he can really where it gives him something to research. It gives him something to find out more about. So he'll end up learning something at school about a particular person or a particular event. And then all of a sudden he wants to find out everything he can about it.
Yes.
You know, so I didn't make that connection, but now that you've said it, now I realize, okay, maybe I can do that for my daughter because she's kind of getting at the age where she's starting to hate reading. You know, she loved it whenever she was younger, but now she really hates it. So maybe I need to look into what I can do to expose her more to historical figures that she might be more interested in.
And you know, it's interesting. So Brad Meltzer, the author and illustrator team with Christopher Eliopoulos for this cover, Brad Meltzer's books, Ordinary People Change the World, that was a big part of the theme for I Am Texas. So all of his books start with, you know, I am George Washington, I am Bessie Coleman. And so we did the I Am Texas book and actually had Random House's permission to utilize all of his branding so it could be an official Ordinary People Change the World book. That's a whole other, you know, exciting part of this project. But my 5-year-old, I was shocked. So we, of course, have every one of Brad Meltzer's Ordinary People Change the World books because, and I just thought that little Jackson would have needed a few more years before he cared about those books that were what I love that Brad does is he wants his young readers, which are elementary age kids, to understand that people that you think are so big and so historical or so amazing, they were just like you. And they had decisions that they had to make. They had hard lives. You know, they were just normal people. And so he almost makes these characters, these heroes, like children in the entire book. And they all look, I mean, you see here, you know, you have Barbara Bush right there, but she looks like a little kid version, you know? So he's very creative when he does that. But Jackson wants to read those books all the time. And he's like, is this person still alive? And asking all these questions. And I was shocked. I'm like, man, Brad Meltzer really knew what he was doing. Even my 5-year-old wants to read these. And of course, they're the longest books out of all of the books before bedtime. That has something to do with it too. But it's exactly what you're saying. They want to know this really is real. That's so cool. So that whole book series definitely does it for sure.
And that's why I think it's so important to have an organization partner with iWrite, similar to the Bryan Museum, because it does bring in that true history, and it's history that specifically in Texas that people can really connect with. And
Yes.
I know that the Bryan Museum, like, you know, it's relatively new, but the building itself isn't so new. So if you can give a little bit
Right.
more of an explanation on that and tell us a
Yes.
little bit more about the history of the Bryan Museum.
Well, the fun thing about the Bryan Museum is that we are a Texas history museum and we are history inside history. And we are not only that, but we are in Galveston, which is the beginning of history for Texas. I mean, there's so much of the firsts that happen for us in Texas, all in Galveston. And Galveston, in its, you know, heyday, it was what we know Houston to be. I mean, it was where all the industry was.
Right.
It was the place to be. And so Galveston today, you know, some people may think of it as, you know, beach town, but then really what it actually is, I mean, it is, you know, right there on the Gulf, but it is a historic town. So the Bryan Museum is housed inside what has been the Galveston Orphans Home that withstood the flood of 1900, one of the most catastrophic events that has ever taken place. And that right there, that history is so unique to us in the building and where we are that we can't help but just value the fact that we're able to talk about history every day inside this building. The building was housing children through once it was an orphanage, and then we know orphanages, they eventually went away through time. Then it was a center for kids where if parents weren't able to take care of their children, there was a place for them to go. And sometimes the parents would pick up the kids, sometimes they would stay there for extended amounts of time. But we know for about 100 years, the building itself was always taking care of children. And in the 80s, it was purchased by a private owner and was turned into a home. And then it stood abandoned for a while. And then in 2013, JP and Mary John Bryan purchased the building for restoration in order to create a museum to house JP's personal collection of over 70,000 plus artifacts, documents, pieces of art. I mean, people can't believe, I mean, we might as well just be an art museum with how much art JP acquired, all Texas, documents, books, all related to the story of Texas and the settlement of the West. And so the museum is set up on the main floor. It's set up where each of the galleries go through the chronological order of settling Texas. And then our top floor, you have our beautiful library which serves also as kind of a pop-up exhibit space, because we always have opportunities to bring in exhibits all the time. And sometimes they're smaller and they don't necessarily fit into our large exhibit space, which on that floor rotates every quarter. So we have our really big Texas stories in there. That's where we get to share some of the untold stories related to Texas history through our special exhibit space. So, and then we also have our Texas Masters Gallery up on the top floor. Right now, we are in the middle of some movement. Our Galveston Orphans Home exhibit was on for about a half year. It was our most anticipated exhibit. Obviously, you know, after 8 years, we knew we had to do something to truly show the story of the orphanage. And we are now in discussions with the supporter of that exhibit who made it happen to possibly move it to the downstairs to recreate the entire downstairs and keep it permanently. So that's something exciting that's going on as we speak. And then right now we are building out our next special exhibit, which is Tejanos of Revolutionary Texas. And that one is extremely exciting to us. It's something we've wanted to do for a long time, and JP, because he has a true passion for the Tejano contribution to why Texas is Texas. And so that has been something that we've been preparing for about 2 years now. And we have a symposium this summer where the topic of the entire day is based off of that exhibit. And we have curriculum that we are building around that exhibit, because of course we want that to be one that we travel to other museums. And then the museum just recently, in the last year and a half, we have launched an exciting project where we build mini museums that are based off of some of our special exhibits. And they're like boxes. It's like a museum in a box. And then it goes to a school district and they pass it through their schools so that the library has it for like an extended amount of time. And they set up pieces of art, they set up the artifacts, they set up the curriculum that our education department creates so that there's something to continue to do. It's not, you don't want to just go look at this. You want to build in some of the literacy writing and some of the research components. So our first mini museum project was based off of our Charles Goodnight painting collection and curriculum. And so that's one that has been in many of the school districts in the Galveston and Greater Houston area. And then we are in conversations with, you know, some of the foundations that we submit our education initiatives to be able to build out those boxes for this Tejano of Revolutionary Texas exhibit. But we have so many different exhibits we could turn into mini museums, you know, so because we have all of the collateral that was created for the exhibit when it was on at the museum. So this is something that we're just really passionate about, because we know that realistically, all of the kids can't get down to Galveston. You know, we have a lot of different districts that visit the museum, but we know that unless we go to them, they're not going to get this history. So the mini museums are, I mean, this is just the beginning for us with this. This is one of the projects that we're really wanting to completely transform our education department initiative. And then we also have professional development workshops that we do with educators so that they can get their CPE credit. And then we also have focus groups now that we've launched with educators, because education is a big part, like I said, of our preservation mission. And I'm a big believer that you should not create things if people aren't going to use them. So value what our educators tell us and their feedback in order to create our programs. Because without their input and their voice, we are wasting our time, because education is a constant moving target. And so we have to kind of know, what can we create that won't literally just disappear in 2 years? It's not going to work for them anymore because of changes that you constantly see happening in education. We have to make sure we do things that make sense. So those are some of the initiatives. Of course, we've got our big writing and art competition. And one of the exciting things with this, we have a big ceremony every year at the Bryan Museum for all of the kids who are published in the I Am Texas competition, to come down and be celebrated. Our artists, because we're really trying to elevate the art opportunity because we have so much art at the museum. Our artists, they are in a gallery display each year, all of those winners, but some of our highest level winners are then invited to be alongside other professional Texas masters that we have showcased at our Art Untamed annual event. And these, we're talking about seniors, juniors in high school are able to auction off their work alongside other professional artists. So similar to what you see happening at the Houston Livestock Show and Rodeo. And they've been so kind to us and helping us kind of get this launched off the ground, because it's just about more opportunity for these kids who have such talent to shine and to benefit. So we always want to give them opportunity. That's the thing. We don't want to just show up, tell them something, and then there's no takeaway. We always want to provide them with opportunities to really get engaged. So that's the education. I'm sure I forgot everything that we're doing, but field trips, obviously. Field trips are happening all the time at the museum, which I love it when we have kids in the building.
Yeah, well, I really appreciate that the Bryan Museum specifically has really honored its own history by servicing and providing a space, not just for its own history, but for the history of the children that once lived there. And it's really utilizing, iWrite and then all of these other endeavors in order to support and preserve that history and that memory. I think that's very important that it stays true to where it came from. You don't see a lot of institutions really doing that whenever they have such a crazy change, going from an orphanage to then now a museum. But I appreciate that. And then I appreciate the work that you're doing to expand, not just for the children of the community, but really listen to their parents, the adults, and then also the educators, because you're providing more space and more of a platform for those voices to be heard. So all in all, it's just fantastic what you're doing. If there's anybody that's listening that wants to find out more about some of these endeavors, where can they go to find out more information if they want to become involved, if they want to get their kids involved, or if they want to just visit the museum just for the sake of visiting, where can we go to find out more information?
Of course. So there's going to be two things for both organizations that are constant. If someone has children that they want to get involved in some of the opportunities. So for the publishing contest and our summer camps and any other programming, like I mentioned, the youth club and the iWriter magazine, you can always go to iWrite.org. And then for the Bryan Museum and that I Am Texas contest and the art competition, summer camps at the Bryan Museum, because of course we have those as well, and workshops. That's the Bryan, BRYAN museum.org. And both of those organizations also link you to iamtx.org, which is where you get all of the background behind the big book and the record and the tour. And of course the competition, you can also go directly there. But the nice thing is all three of those things just link back to each other. So if you land on one, you can eventually find the other ones.
Perfect. Well, we'll be sure to link those to this podcast so that everybody has access to that information. Cindy, do you have any other questions for Melissa before we let her go and get on her busy day? Yes.
I do have one, and this may verge on political, so you can disconnect me. But with the challenges that are happening in public schools with the reduction in library staff and things like that, does that have an impact on you guys being able to go into those campuses with the Museum in the Box programs?
So far, it has not affected us because we haven't actually gone directly through the librarians. It's typically through the just direct fourth grade lead or if they're in the social studies department, that's been, and they just happen to set it up in the library because that's the most, that's the easiest place for community. So we haven't really seen that affect us at the museum yet. At iWrite, we have been in and out of every one of the Houston districts. And depending on the change that comes down means that we may not be in that district that year because, you know, they push out anybody who isn't internal. So we have gone through that for many different seasons. And so now it doesn't really affect us. We just know the way you're supposed to pivot. And, you know, we never serve just one district. So, you know, if one district is going through changes and corrections and transitions, we know, well, this one that we've been wanting to do some work with that have been inquiring that we didn't have the space for, well, now that opening exists. So it's like, it's just a full circle all the time, constantly.
Yep.
That's good to hear.
Yeah.
Yep.
Mhm.
Have you been able to collaborate with any of the larger like museums or libraries in Houston or even outside of the Houston area?
On the big book tour, yes, we have been able to do work with the Alamo. That one was definitely a just exciting experience to be able to have the book at the Alamo for about 3 months. I mean, we had thousands and thousands of kids see it and then enter the contest because of that. The book was at the Texas Center at Schreiner University for quite some time. Schreiner actually, they did a lot of the judging on the writing end of the contest for story writing. So things like that. Over the years with iWrite, we have partnered with the libraries. We've done big community annual things for years. So it just kind of depends on the season and where our focus is and what partnerships make the most sense that year. But we're involved in partner networks where kind of all of the education and literacy organizations know each other and we know what each other are doing, and we're all friends, right? We're all friends with each other in the community because we all have a similar mission, but we all do it in different ways or we're serving differently. So it makes sense to work together. Because there really isn't anyone that's doing exactly the same thing, which is good.
Right.
You don't want all of the organizations doing exactly the same thing.
Yep.
So
Wonderful.
Does the big book ever come to the rodeo?
Well, we are starting to brainstorm, not with the rodeo yet, but how we could approach the rodeo on that maybe happening. So stay tuned. We, one of our sponsors, we know that they are very interested in seeing it there. So that's where all of that would happen. We love our
Fantastic.
sponsors. They make things happen. The big book would not have happened without Phillips 66 and HEB. That is for sure. So
Fabulous.
Love HEB.
I know, we do too. HEB's been the publishing contest sponsor for the iWrite Short Stories by Kids for Kids annual publishing contest for 5 years. So
Wow.
they're a huge part of everything that we do. And then Phillips 66, they are the main sponsor on all of our curriculum programming that goes into Title I schools, specifically in English and in bilingual English Spanish. We have a curriculum that shows both.
Oh, wow. That's amazing. Well,
So
cool.
Connections, man.
lots of, I mean, it's so hard to do something just with one. I mean, you really have to value the partnerships and balance everybody out because, you know, there's ownership in each of these projects because of who's involved. So it's been exciting to kind of, you know, put those puzzle pieces together to see where everybody, you know, is able to contribute.
Wonderful. Wonderful. Well, Melissa, on behalf of TPG Talks and our entire community, our members, as well as everybody else listening, we just want to express how truly grateful we are for you agreeing to speak with us again, after already speaking with us early in the year. You've provided so much information for us. And I know that this is a topic that really has engaged our membership, and I know it's going to impact, even more people. So hopefully we're trying right now to see if we can plan an event so that we can go see you at the Bryan Museum.
Yes.
And we're
In a couple
definitely
months, actually. I think you'll at least have your date tentatively.
Yes.
Yeah. Mm-hmm.
Yes. So that is exciting. We're definitely waiting for that trip. And we're definitely going to encourage our listeners as well as our family members and everybody else that we're connected to become more involved with this amazing organizations that you're a part of.
Thank you so much. It was my pleasure to be able to have this conversation with you both. Thank you so much for inviting me.
Great to see you again. Thank you.
Yes.
Oh, wow.
Wow.
That was absolutely amazing. I think she was a great, first speaker
Yes.
and guest to our podcast. So Cindy, is there anything that you want to touch on, before we close out for the day?
Well, first of all, I agree. Dynamic, interesting, involved in stuff that touches us all. And after 35 years in the staffing industry and looking at the quality of applications and communication that people have, I mean, much needed that getting involved with them in the early stages. So I think it was fascinating. The only other thing I would add is that if to those who are listening, if you are a woman and you are looking for connections and looking to build a network of people from a diverse group of industries, don't forget to check out TPG. And you can go to our website, which is tpghouston.org. Take a peek at some of our upcoming programs, one of which is going to be the visit to the Bryan Museum. And we do lots of other things, and I'd encourage you to check us out.
Absolutely. Well, that's going to conclude our podcast for today. We just want to say thank you again to the remarkable Melissa Williams Murphy. We truly admire the work that she's doing. And again, on behalf of TPG Talks and all of our listeners, we extend our heartfelt gratitude for sharing your story with us. So to our audience, thank you for joining us on this new and exciting journey. I hope that you found value in today's episode. I certainly did. So if you have any feedback, please leave us a review. Your feedback is invaluable. It's really going to help us to create new, exciting programs in the future. This is something that we definitely want to continue. I do want to say a special thank you to my co-host, Cindy Jennings. Again, thank you so much for being a fantastic partner and participating in the dialogue. It definitely helped to enhance, and it kept me from being lost as well. So thank you for engaging and truly being a guinea pig as we started.
It was a blast. It was a total blast.
I'm so excited that you were able to be my first co-host. So thank you so much. For everyone else, please stay tuned for more empowering conversations with extraordinary women in our future episodes. Until then, just keep the conversations going. That's what we want to do. We want to engage and create those new connections. So this is TPG Talks, where empowerment meets conversations. Until next time, take care, stay inspired, and continue making an impact.